He's back. Yes, we may have banned kitties from social media, but this big kitty is still around. Yes, Bintang Bernie back for 2026. And what do we have to look forward to this year? Well, the Europeans are still trying to start a war with Russia, and America has just positioned itself for a war against Iran. Wouldn't it be nice if just one year we had actually had something to look forward to? Friday News Review, Bintang Bernie, welcome back. Welcome to Friday News Review for the 16th of January 2026. Yes, the first one for the new year, for a miserable looking year ahead, to be quite frank. But we'll talk about that. I've been away for several months in the country of my favourite beverage. I've been in Indonesia, and unfortunately I'm back and ready to do more Friday News Reviews. I'll first tell you about just a brief rundown on Indonesia before we talk about how miserable the year ahead is looking and the dangers that we face as a society. But Indonesia is, as a country, it's fucking nuts, right? In a good way. And it's interesting when you're in a country like Indonesia to see, ironically, they don't have any of the, say, press or political freedoms that we have or we take for granted in Australia. Or that we had. We're losing them now thanks to those Zionist dogs, but we'll talk about that later anyway. But it's interesting the level of personal freedoms. You don't realise how constrained you are in Australia or in the so-called first world societies. How many rules and regulations there are is what I'm getting at. Now I understand having 4 people on a motorbike without crash helmets is not always a good thing because when they have an accident, they die or they get hurt. So I'm not an anarchist and I'm not advocating anarchy. I think society needs governments to have rules and regulations and we need controls. But you often wonder if in countries like Australia, we're taking those things to extremes. Case in point, a mate of mine wants to go camping up at the Turon River next month. And he said, oh, it'll be great. We can go up there. We'll throw a line in the river. We might even catch a fish for dinner. And of course, my first thought was, oh, shit. I better get a fishing license. Now, why do I need to get a fishing license? I mean, we're not going commercial prawning or trawling or something. This is 2 blokes sitting around a campfire hoping to catch a fish for dinner. And yet, I need to clear that with my government. I need to pay a fee. You wonder if we are too heavily regulated. But on the other hand, I'll tell you a little anecdote about Indonesia to show you the dangers of having places that are unregulated. We were staying in a nice hotel. It was a Grand Mercure hotel in a place called Malang, which is a fascinating town in the middle of Java. Beautiful volcano and a really interesting plateau. I advise you, if you're ever in Indonesia, go to Malang and go up to Mount Bromo. And you can stand looking down into the bubbling caldera, OH&S Indonesian style. It's wonderful. But we're in this hotel, we're in this rooftop, those beautiful rooftop bar. As I said, it was a Grand Mercure, really nice hotel. And we were up having some cigars and some after dinner drinks out on the balcony. And there was a group of Indonesians nearby, and they, as they always do, they're interested in foreigners. They're not racist like us in Australia. They're quite intrigued by people from other countries. They don't hate them by default. So they started chatting, invited us over, and we started having a yak to them. One of them was a undercover policeman with a narcotics squad. So at that stage, particularly my wife was keen to get out of there as soon as possible because you don't want to suddenly find there's been a bag of cocaine planted in your room. But he was a lovely bloke, and all he wanted was a Australian wife. Kept asking if we'd find him a wife, and I got friendly with a bloke who turned out to be in the Indonesian army. Now, we started chatting, and he was a lieutenant colonel in Kopassus. Now, Kopassus is their special forces organisation, the equivalent of the SAS, I believe, in Australian parlance. And let's just say that their human rights record is, shall we say, dubious. Although sadly, one must admit now that we could say the same about our own SAS, unfortunately. A really hurtful and disgraceful thing that's happened in this country. Anyway, moving on. So this guy's chatting away and saying he's my best friend, and he's blind drunk. They're drinking whiskey. The perception that Indonesians don't drink because they're Muslim, mate. Everyone enjoys getting fucked up now and again. Let me tell you. So this guy is yakking away and saying, we should come out the next day to his base and we'll fire some machine guns. And my mate who's with me at the time, who's quite drunk, just says, kind of off the cuff, "Oh, well, if you're in the army then, mate, show us your gun." Bad move. Bad move, Timmy. The guy reaches into his nearby man bag, pulls out what looked to me, I'm anti-gun, by the way. I don't know much about guns and I don't like them. And he hands me, here, have this, what looked like a nickel-plated Glock pistol. Now, let me tell you something, sports fans. Nothing on this earth sobers you up quicker than being handed a firearm at a party. Because I was pretty drunk. When he put it in my hand, I became pretty sober pretty quickly. Luckily, I had the wherewithal to ask him 2 questions. Is it loaded? No. And is the safety on? Yes. So I said, okay, so we took some pictures. Then he pulled out the bullets and started playing around with the bullets. That wasn't good. So we kind of detached ourselves from the festivities and went to bed. Now the kicker comes to this story. This is the kicker to the story. The next day at breakfast, my wife and my friend Tim were there and we're chatting away and we're talking about last night and how bizarre it totally was. And my wife started saying, yeah, it was lucky I talked him out of it. It was lucky I talked him out of it. And we said, what do you mean? Now, you've got to understand, my wife is Indonesian, so a lot of the conversation was in Bahasa, in Indonesian. It was bouncing around. They all spoke fluent English, but they were speaking Indonesian as well, so we missed out on parts of it. And I'm kind of glad we did, because when we questioned my wife on what was it you talked him out of, apparently this Kopassus Lieutenant Colonel, who was blind drunk, by the way, was going to load up the gun and fire some rounds off the balcony to prove to us it was a real pistol, because he was concerned that we didn't really believe it was real. I had no issue. As soon as he handed it to me, I didn't think it was a toy. He was going to fire from the Grand Mercure off the balcony rounds. Now, Malang is probably the size of, I don't know, I should check the relative populations, but it would be easily the size of, say, Newcastle, and we're in the Grand Mercure. So can you imagine being in a hotel in Hunter Street, Newcastle, and firing a pistol off the balcony? It wouldn't go down too well. That's how Indonesia is. So I guess that's the extreme of what I'm saying about how we're perhaps overregulated, but then there's the danger of being underregulated. So I guess old Bintang's thinking, maybe it's not a bad thing that I have to get a fishing license after all. I'd rather have to get a fishing license than have dudes firing handguns off balconies. Now, coming back to the events of the year and the events that have happened. Okay, and speaking of firing guns, now we're going to have massive knee-jerk reactions, and we're going to have all these issues where our freedom of speech is being curtailed, our right to protest is being curtailed. Basically, our democratic and our civil liberties are being taken away, and it's all to do with Zionism. I did a Friday news review a couple of months ago where I said Zionism is infiltrating Australian politics, and I talked a lot about it. I didn't know at that time how bad it would become. Basically, because 2 fuckwits went and took a gun down to Bondi Beach and started shooting people. Well done, idiots. You've done a lot for your cause. All you've done is given Zionists yet another reason to play victim, which they fucking love, and yet another reason to curtail our freedoms, to stifle dissent, and to ingratiate more of their control into this country. We talk a lot about, you get the Pauline Hansonites, the rednecks. I mean, Bintang Bernie's first law, most people are stupid. Well, people actually vote for Pauline Hanson. How much more stupid can you actually get to put that woman in charge of the laws that govern your life? That's what you're doing when you vote for people. Always makes me laugh when people talk about politics. Oh, I'm not interested. Politics controls your life. It controls the world. You're putting people in charge of your very existence. These are the people who make the rules, who ordain how you and I live. You're not interested in that? Sad, sad, sad. Now, you get the Pauline Hansonites, as I was saying, or the Barnaby Joyce. I mean, imagine voting for Barnaby Joyce. I mean, what has that man ever achieved apart from falling over drunk? He's a buffoon of the highest order. Yet people are saying, hey, you go make the decisions. You decide how I'll live, Barnaby. Once again, Bintang's first law. Most people are stupid because they fucking are. Now, all these people keep going on about, integration. It's all the Aussie flag waving mob, lovers or leavers, if you don't fit in, fuck off. All of those, slogan bearing morons. Have a chat to the Zionist community if you want to talk about integration. I will tell you right now, Muslims, people from overseas, ethnic people integrate into this country far, far more than any Zionist ever did or ever does or ever will. These people have one loyalty and one loyalty alone. Their loyalty is to Israel, the Jewish state. They do not integrate to us. They do not have loyalty to Australia. They take our citizenship or they take our residency. They get all the advantages of it, and yet they are 100% behind Israel. And therein lies the point to what I'm saying. That is why there is a backlash against them. There is no anti-Semitism in this country. It itself is a bullshit word, anti-Semitism. Palestinians are Semites as well, but of course people are too stupid to work that out. But let's not get bogged down in semantics, Bintang. Let's move on. But the backlash was against the genocide in Palestine, which the Australian Jewish community has stood 100% behind and has backed 100% because, as I said, their loyalty is with Israel. It's not with Australia. And sadly, our government backed it. Our government was still trading with Israel. There's contracts with Elbit, the Israeli arms manufacturer, that have been going on throughout this. So we are complicit in genocide, and you have a group of people in this country who have supported, unequivocally stood behind genocide. Now, I must preface, don't want my tea to go cold. Not all Jews support Zionism. Not all Jews support Israel. There are a lot of Jewish organizations, particularly, funny enough, New York seems to be the epicenter of the anti-Zionist movement. So you always need to separate Judaism and Zionism because the two are totally different things. Zionism is a political movement advanced by Herzog in the 1890s. It has nothing to do with Judaism, yet the Zionists corrupt it, and they say that if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. Okay? I'm anti-Zionist. I'm not anti-Judaism. Jew? bit stuck on the correct terminology for that one. There's nothing wrong with Judaism as a religion. There is everything wrong with Zionism as a political ideology, which is what it is. It is a colonial, oppressive, racist ideology, and it should be called out as such. And that is the backlash that has happened in Australia. It is not about anti-Semitism, okay? But the Zionists love to grab all that and collect it together. You can't criticize us. You can't criticize Israel because that means you're criticizing the Jews. No, you're not. You're criticizing a bunch of right-wing fucking fanatics, religious fundamentalist, dangerous people who should be criticized and who should be called out as a risk to society and should be, quite frankly, fucking condemned, because Zionism has done nothing other than bring misery and subjugation to innocent people in the Middle East. And every time they fight back, they're painted as the instigators of violence when they're not. They're reacting to the violence propagated by Zionism. Anyway, enough of that rant. Moving on, what else has been happening in the world? Anyone who says that the American operation to kidnap the president of Venezuela is good is a complete fucking idiot. And you should tell them that to their face. I will. What has happened, obviously, is one of a complete travesty of international law. You can't just go around and pluck leaders from countries because you don't like them. I mean, after all, aren't we all about democracy and self-determination? But of course, when a country elects someone like Maduro, we're told it's all dodgy, the election's all rigged. Funny how easy it is to rig all these elections and how often it's done when it's the people that we don't like. But when it's the people that we do like say Zelensky, no one talks about how corrupt Ukrainian politics are and how shit their elections are and how multi-millionaire backer plucked a dude from obscurity, well, not obscurity, he was a well-known comedian, and pushed him up to centre stage and basically brought him into the government. No one talks about that kind of electoral fraud. It's only the people we don't like. So whether you like Nicolas Maduro or not, he was the head of state of a sovereign nation. You can't just go and take him away because you don't like him. So what's happened is a travesty of justice. It is a breach of international law. It goes against the UN Charter, Article 2, Para 4, and it is basically a criminal act. And of course, what happens? Our government is pondering it. It's a serious issue to have a look at. Now, I like to turn things around. I like to give analogies. Just imagine this analogy. Imagine if China had gone and taken the head of the Taiwanese government and captured him and taken him to China. Just imagine. Now, given that Taiwan is officially part of China, okay, it's another thing that the morons don't understand. Under the One China policy, our government states, bumped the microphone. Our government states that Taiwan is part of China. So there would be some justification for China kidnapping leaders of Taiwan who have consistently defied the Chinese government, who have consistently made technically illegal arms deals with countries like America and armed themselves against China, against their own country. I'm no international legal expert, but I would say there would be some legal basis for China interceding in Taiwan's political affairs, given that Taiwan is technically a province of China. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. Now just imagine, how do you think Anthony Albanese would have reacted if China had done the same thing to Taiwan that America has done to Venezuela? Do you think he would be watching events with interest, these are serious matters, or would he be outraged like the rest of the world, condemning China for its flagrant breach of international law, okay, and its lack of adherence to, my favourite term, the rules-based order? Yes, the rules-based order basically means there's a bunch of rules that no one knows, no one understands, but we expect other countries to adhere to, but we don't have to. I totally get it when the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans point their finger at us and they call the West a bunch of hypocrites. Because you know what? We fucking are. We bang on about rules-based orders, and yet we break rules left, right, and centre when it suits us. We overthrow governments. I mean, we've just tried to overthrow the government in Georgia. Notice how that's all died down because our attempts to overthrow that government failed. Now, what I'm getting at, and what I think a lot of people are missing, is, first off, Venezuela, the world's largest reserve of oil. Now, you would think the one good thing that came out of the illegal war in Iraq, I thought, was going to be that people finally woke the fuck up to how their governments lie to them. Now, the minute you heard that America was threatening Venezuela and that Venezuela had the world's largest reserve of oil, wouldn't the penny just drop like crystal clear? Isn't that so obvious? This is not about the people of Venezuela, who are poor and are impoverished because of the sanctions we put on them, which started with Barack Obama, who actually stated that Venezuela was a clear threat to American security. Really, really, Barack. Were they going to, what, drive their 20-odd tanks all the way up through South America and Mexico and to attack the United States? Was that the threat? Come off it. What a joke. These people have been subjugated by sanctions. They've been crippled economically for decades. And then we turn around and say, oh, look how poor they are. We need to save them. No, we're the ones making them poor. Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil in Venezuela so that the money, instead of being exported to companies like Exxon and Mobil, the money would go to the Venezuelan people. And at that time, do you know what happened? Unemployment in Venezuela halved. It went down by 50%, directly as a result of Chavez nationalizing the oil. That, by the way, is what's called sovereign risk. You may remember when Kevin Rudd, who tried to bring in a super profit tax on our miners, originally straight away he was hit with claims of sovereign risk brought in by those same miners. And of course, people are so stupid, once again, they went around repeating it, oh, sovereign risk, sovereign risk. There is no sovereign risk here. Gina Reinhardt is never going to be nationalised. Twiggy Forrester is never going to be nationalised. It was a lie to stop them having to pay their fair share of tax, which would have raised millions upon millions of dollars into federal coffers, which would have helped all of us. But of course, once again, that shows you how stupid and easily manipulated people are. So what happened in Venezuela is sovereign risk. And that is what organizations, companies have to take on as a risk. Okay? You're going into a country, you're exploiting their resources. At some point, if they don't like it and they take over, and you can argue the technicalities and the legality of that, but ultimately the oil in Venezuela belongs to Venezuelan people, not to Mobil, Exxon, and not to corporate America. Well, it did. It doesn't anymore. But the danger in this, and this is what I see, and I think it's being overlooked by a lot of people, is Trump has said that America will then control 55% of the world's oil resources and reserves. Now remember, we're living in the age of energy. He who controls energy is king, okay? And that is why countries do what they do, including Russia and China. That's why they're making sure they've got influence in their regions. They want to secure their energy supplies. Russia is in the fortunate position where it has massive resources, so we've tried to sanction it out of existence, and they've just turned around and laughed at us because they've got everything they need. And they've just started trading with other countries instead of the West, and now Europe is going bankrupt, and they keep asking for more sanctions. This is Europe playing Russian roulette. Click. Oh, do I get another turn? That's how the sanctions game's unfolding in Europe. But what I'm extremely concerned about is America has suddenly made this bold and illegal move to control Venezuelan oil because it is positioning itself for the upcoming war in Iran. Iran has huge oil reserves, and in any future war or major conflict, they would block the Straits of Hormuz, which would mean all of that oil flowing out of the Gulf would either stop or be in peril, and oil tankers would be getting blown up. You can imagine the havoc that would create in world oil markets. It's going to fuck up all of us, by the way. This is what I mean. These idiots, the average person, your superannuation, your cost of living, the cost of your... all these are going to be blown out of proportion by the wars that you're actually actively supporting because you're dumb. But my concern is America is now strategically positioning itself for an upcoming war against Iran. Now, you remember in my last news review, or recent one, I said that Netanyahu is not finished. His objective is to destroy Iran. He's got Iraq, he's got Syria, he's got Libya. The man is a lunatic. I mean, if there is ever a person who should be in jail, or let's face it, dying of a hideous terminal disease, it should be Benjamin Netanyahu. He is one of the most evil people in the world. Say what you like about the Nazis, say what you like about Adolf Hitler, and they were horrible, but at least they were fucking honest. They stood up and said, we're a bunch of cunts and we're going to kill people we don't like. Snakes like Netanyahu, dogs like him, come up with this lovely, nice front, I'm just protecting people, I'm a nice guy. They are just as every bit evil as Hitler, as Himmler. Netanyahu is scum of the earth, but he presents nice and happy. Now that man has single-handedly been responsible for millions of deaths. He has started wars throughout that region and advocated them His next target has always been Iran. And America knows this, and America knows the danger this is going to cause to world oil markets. And that is why America is grabbing Venezuela, because they're securing their future oil supplies in the event of a conflict with Iran. So mark my words, sports fans, that's what we've got to look forward to. I'm looking around for my mouse here, sorry, because I'm going to finish up and leave you all in peace. But that's my prediction for the 2026. There's going to be a major conflict with Iran, Trump and the Israelis. And just as an aside, all this bullshit you're hearing about Iran shooting peaceful protesters, fucking lies, okay? What you have in Iran is a bunch of Israeli and possibly US agents, but the Mossad is in there, and they are doing what the CIA did in Maidan in 2014 in Ukraine. They're shooting people, they're shooting protesters, they're shooting the government forces to cause unrest, to cause riots. What's not reported in the Western media is there have been huge demonstrations in support of the government in Iran. Okay? People in Iran are not happy because, once again, they're being sanctioned by us. We are making conditions difficult for them, not the Iranian government. We are the ones making it hard for them to get food and goods and services because of the sanctions we put on them. Okay? If it wasn't for that, the government would be quite popular. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the Iranian government is the best government in the world, but as I've said often, all these people criticizing Iran, I guarantee you right now, women in Iran have far more freedom than they do in Saudi Arabia. Women in North Korea have far more freedom than they do in Saudi Arabia. So why are we not complaining about the conditions imposed on the Saudi women by their monarchy, by their dictatorship? Okay? It's a hereditary, a monarchy is just a dictatorship in other terms, a hereditary family passed on ruler, which when we talk about, the North Koreans, it's hereditary. Well, if Kim Jong-il was a king, it'd be quite acceptable, but because he's not, he's a dictator. So the lies that's being spread about what's happening in Iran, these protesters are anything but peaceful. I've seen videos of them. What's that young girl's name? Oh God, I've forgotten her name now. Moore, was it? The 3-year-old who was shot recently by the peaceful protesters going to the pharmacy with a mother. A 3-year-old girl shot. Okay, all this has caused huge outrage against these protesters because the vast majority of Iranians know that this is an Israeli-backed incited attempt at regime change and revolution, and they're against it because they don't like the Israelis. They see them as an enemy, which they are, because they've been bombing and attacking Iran, and they've had their fingers in there for decades trying to destabilize and overthrow the country. So all this bullshit about, Trump going on about Iran, if they shoot peaceful protesters, they're having to fire back against well-armed protesters who are trying to cause dissent, they set fire to marketplaces, they've burned a whole fire station down, burned the firefighters alive. Who burns firefighters alive? Huh? Peaceful protesters? So mark my words, what is happening in Iran is an attempt at regime change. It will fail. And then the next stage is all-out conflict, which is why the Americans are grabbing Venezuelan oil to buffer themselves against the closure of supply coming through from the Gulf states. Now, I hope I'm wrong, as always. But as Bintang always says, mate, you need to be a realist. You need to see the world for what it is. And the world is basically, quite frankly, it's a bit of a cunt of a place, okay? Because that's the way the world works. It's evil. It's controlled by evil people. Anyway, that's enough for this this news review. I hope that you had a good Christmas and New Year. And I hope that 2026 will be a good year. To quote, the immortal words of John Lennon and all those Christmas songs we heard, recently played in supermarkets and shopping centres around the world. War is over if you want it. The problem is nobody fucking wants it. Bintang Bernie saying, have a good week.
And if you don't like protest down the streets.